The AFC South is going to be one of the most fun divisions in the NFL this year. We'll tell you who you should be buying and selling from that division next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. You can also check me out over on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And joining me today, as always, is Michael Fabiano. You can follow him on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. You can also check out all of his great work over on SI. And on today's show, we're continuing our division preview. We're looking at the AFC South, a division that I think is going to be a lot of fun this year, telling the players you need to buy, sell, and some sleepers to watch. But let's first start with some players that we are targeting in trades. Who do you got?
Yeah, Marcus, I'm going to go with Tank Bigsby. Last year ended up earning a 50-50 split with Travis Etienne. Etienne was one of the biggest busts in fantasy football last year. Not a lot of talk about him either in terms of him being as bad as he was. And then you look at the yards per carry for Bigsby at 4.6. He rushed for 7 touchdowns. He's in the top 25 among running backs in rushing yards after first contact, rushes of 10-plus yards, rushing yards over expected. So he was a pretty productive player when he got the football. And Etienne Jr., although all of the reports have been good that we've heard in the offseason about Etienne Jr., will he ever get back to that 2023 form? Or was that just that one big year that he'll never be able to have again? Bigsby is 23. He'll be 24 in August. He has 2 more years on his contract. And Etienne Jr. is in a contract year. So when you also factor in that they drafted Bayshall Rootin' Tootin', well, is there a spot for Etienne Jr. in 2026? And would they rather just go with Bigsby and Tootin' as their top 2 backs after this upcoming season? Now, Etienne Jr. is going to be motivated to play well because he's singing for his supper. He wants to get a big contract. You know, you also have to factor in that he and Trevor Lawrence are good pals dating back to their time from Clemson. So I'm sure Lawrence is going to try to get him to remain on the roster and talk to the Jaguars front office about keeping him. But the bottom line here is that when you see regression like that and you see another running back step up, I just don't see there being a scenario where suddenly Etienne Jr. is going to reemerge as a feature back and they're going to put Bigsby on the back burner. So based on the fact that he's really cheap, I mean, you look at the ADP data, and I know we're talking trades here, but I mean, he's an RB46. His ADP is in the 130s. You could get him relatively cheap and potentially land maybe the Jaguars starting running back as soon as 2026.
And honestly, maybe even before that, because I wonder what this offense is going to look like under Liam Cohen. And this is just my overall thoughts here. I'm buying almost everybody in this offense. Travis Hunter, I'm willing to pay the price. Wide receiver 17. Trevor Lawrence, quarterback 18. I'm buying all the Jaguars players. But my vision for this team kind of long-term is that it's going to be Tank Bigsby is the between the tackle grinder, getting the goal line touches, the short yardage touches, and kind of being that every down back. And then with the idea that Bayshall Tootin is going to be the change of pace guy, the guy that comes in and gives you some speed. Maybe they use him in the screen game. Maybe he's more of the passing down back, basically trying to recreate what Detroit has in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. But the difference is Tootin isn't Jahmyr Gibbs, but I do think Tank Bigsby could do a pretty doggone good David Montgomery impression, right? So that's why I think this is a really good call. RB46 right now, it's nothing. And I think there's been some Jags beat reporters out there that said if they go to more of a gap scheme, which is what they're anticipating, it's going to be Bigsby getting all those touches rather than Etienne. And honestly, would you be surprised, Fabs, if Etienne is somebody that gets moved like in week 2, week 3 to a team like our Cowboys that desperately
knew you were going to say that, dude.
Well, I mean,
I knew you were going to say that.
I just don't know. I just don't know if Etienne is a good fit for this offense anymore.
And that's why I'm going after Bigsby. Because I think if Tank Bigsby, gets 250 carries in a season, I mean, I think he could be not an elite fantasy running back because he's not a pass catcher, but he could be a pretty good asset moving forward. And again, youth is on his side. He doesn't have a lot of touches in the NFL over his first couple seasons there with the Jaguars. So, and it's when you're talking about dynasty, certainly much more so than when you're talking about redrafts. You're trying to project things out. You're trying to put pieces together, right? Dynasty is all about like putting those puzzle pieces together to see what is the expected or potential result of a backfield, of an offense, of a wide receiver room. And that's kind of what we're doing with Bigsby. We're projecting that Etienne's in the final year of his deal. He's not coming off a very productive season. And when you're talking about money, how many teams want to pay a running back? If Etienne wants to get paid, which he's got really no legs to stand on at this point, but still, you've got Bigsby under control for a few more years and it ain't going to cost you a lot of money. And if he's a better fit for the offense, as you mentioned, I don't see any reason why they don't go in that direction.
One more player that I wanted to mention that I am targeting in all of my leagues from this AFC South. Actually, I'm not going to tell you. I want you to figure this out. Do you know who is the active leader in the NFL in rushing yards per game?
In rushing yards per game? Like, what are we talking about? All time? Like historically?
Well, like for their career, who right now in the NFL, who leads the league in rushing yards per game?
Okay, so it's got to be someone from the AFC South.
Correct.
Right. So I mean, like that kind of breaks down. It's not a Jaguar.
Good job.
It's not Joe Mixon.
Nope.
It's not Tony Pollard. It's Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. Jonathan Taylor, 89.7 rushing yards per game for his entire career. He was quietly really good last year, 1,500 total yards, 12 touchdowns. I kind of think this offense is just going to be better with Daniel Jones at quarterback. And yes, I think Daniel Jones is going to win that starting job. And Daniel Jones isn't going to take away rushing touchdowns. I think he's going to keep this offense afloat, where Anthony Richardson completing 47% of his passes did not last year. I love Jonathan Taylor, and he's RB9 right now. I just don't see any way, assuming he stays healthy, that he doesn't finish higher than that this year.
There is not a member of the Colts team that doesn't come with question marks, not named Jonathan Taylor. And the only thing that you have to worry about is, like you said, I mean, durability. If he stays healthy, he's going to certainly finish in the top 10 and probably higher than that. So centerpiece of the offense. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, with that Daniel Jones, Anthony Richardson competition during camp. But regardless, JT is the centerpiece of that Colts offense without question. He's still in the prime of his career. And, it's funny too. You think about it. He's actually one of the players over the last several years that had experienced the curse of being the number one overall pick. You remember?
Yeah.
He had a massive season, was the top pick, ended up getting hurt. But last year when he was out there, and, let's not compare him to Christian McCaffrey. McCaffrey is far less durable. JT was pretty good.
Yeah. And last year he averaged 21.5 rushing attempts per game. Like the Colts, one thing we know under Shane Steichen is that they are going to feed Jonathan Taylor. There's really no other running back on this roster that you feel great about. They drafted DJ Giddens in round 5, but that's a change of pace guy. So I'm all in on Jonathan Taylor. I love the price tag right now. RB9, you can get him after the first 2 rounds of your startup drafts. Give me Jonathan Taylor. All right, let's talk about some running backs that we may be selling from the AFC South, not named Tank Bigsby and Jonathan Taylor. It only really leaves a couple of names. Let's talk about Joe Mixon next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're about baseball under the lights or golf on the green, or maybe you're into high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it just a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are out getting sunburned at the beach. I love how easy it is to use FanDuel. They have fast payouts, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. And if you're new to FanDuel, New customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are discussing the AFC South and some players that we are now selling. And let's talk about Joe Mixon, who played really well for Houston last year, maybe better than anybody anticipated. But why are you selling now?
Well, he was phenomenal in the first, 11 weeks of the season, and then the wheels fell off. So let's look at the numbers. Over that 11-week span, he averaged 22.6 points per game. That was the best among running backs. He also averaged more than 100 scrimmage yards. He scored 11 total touchdowns. He was phenomenal. In fact, I sent him a message on X. I'm like, bro, you're fixing to be the MVP in fantasy football. I kind of laughed at it. But then he kind of fell apart right after that. When you look at the numbers, he failed to score more than 10.6 fantasy points over his final 4 games. And we all know that he's been dealing with some kind of foot ankle thing in the offseason. The report suggests he's on track for training camp. But let's keep in mind, Joe Mixon is not a young back anymore. He's entering his age 29 season. He has more than 2,100 regular season carries in his career. That doesn't obviously count the postseason. Mm-hmm. And the Texans made a couple of moves that sort of make you think, right? I mean, you remember the old Arsenio Hall movie or the TV show? You know, some things you're going to think about, what makes you go, And drafting Woody Marks and signing Nick Chubb made me go, what's going on there with Joe Mixon? Nick Chubb obviously is also towards the end of his career, but all the reports that we've been seeing are very positive. You know, you see him out there squatting, 2 cars worth of weight. You know, I mean, he's just a beast. And the Texans didn't bring him in to sit him on the bench. So is this going to be a 60-40 split, a 65-45 split? The thing is that this is probably the biggest threat to Mixon's fantasy value and his production that he's ever had, because Nick Chubb is not coming out there just to, cash a paycheck. He wants to go out and prove that, hey, man, what I did earlier in my career, I still got a little bit of that. And so when you now factor in that this could be a 2 or 3-headed backfield monster, and I think Mixon's still going to be the lead guy, don't get me wrong, but you worry about the durability potentially becoming an issue. You worry about the workload potentially becoming an issue. So if you can flip Mixon now, and right now is the RB22 in terms of ADP, if you could flip him now and try to sell somebody else on, hey, look how great he was last year for most of the year, and he's in a very good offense, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I always tell you got to be a salesman or a saleswoman when you're in a fantasy football league talking about trades. But I think this is the last chance you have to get value for Joe Mixon, and you always want to try and sell before the cliff comes.
Yeah, and I agree with you. This is generally the age when these running backs really start to fall off. And you look at Joe Mixon, he's got a bunch of carries on his body, not only from like Cincinnati, but also back at Oklahoma. They used him up there as well. I want to ask you what you would be willing to trade Joe Mixon for, because some of the recent trades, like if you're trading him for draft capital, let's assume you're in a neutral situation, right? Would you trade Joe Mixon for the 201?
I probably would do that. Yeah. Top pick of the second round. Yeah, I'd probably do that.
For some players straight up, would you trade Joe Mixon for Isaiah Pacheco?
You know what? That is a tough one. And I actually would say, yes, I would, because of the age. And because, the other backs in Kansas City are on short-term deals. And Pacheco's still got a shot to have a good year and cash in on that.
All right, what about flipping him for another veteran running back? Would you trade Joe Mixon for Alvin Kamara, who's 2 years older?
Yes.
Okay. What about David Montgomery, same age?
That's my guy. I love David Montgomery, man. I'd go with David Montgomery.
Okay. What about a young guy, Bashal Tutin, RB29 in the latest batch of ADP from Dynasty League Football?
No, not enough.
So yeah, I agree. What about someone like Tony Pollard, who I'm going to talk about in just a second?
No, not going there.
Okay. So you want to flip him more than probably for somebody that's in that same tier, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery. It just sounds like you like Joe Mixon, but you would rather cash in and get somebody who has maybe a little bit more upside.
Well, right. And also factor in, Kamara doesn't have much competition in New Orleans, and he really never has. And he's not the type of back that gets a ton of punishment because a lot of his production is as a receiver. He's not a guy who's going to be, carrying the ball 350 times a year. And, we know all about what his game is. And Pollard, I mean, you've got Tajay Spears there as well. I don't know that's somewhat of a lateral move, if not a bit of a decrease in terms of what you're getting back.
I wanted to ask you about the Titans real quick because we haven't talked about them at all. You look at this roster, like from a dynasty perspective, Tony Pollard is RB 33 right now. Their top receiver is Calvin Ridley. He is wide receiver 48. Is there anybody in this offense, and we'll get to your sleeper in a second, so outside of your sleeper, is there any of these veterans that you want to buy from the Titans?
I'm not going to overpay, but I mean, if I'm looking at opportunity, I mean, Calvin Ridley, you would think he's going to lead that team in targets by a mile. I like Pollard. I got no problems with Pollard. I just think Pollard kind of is what he is, at this point in his career. He's an RB2 type. He's not going to put up massive numbers. And so they don't have anyone that excites me. I guess the player I'm most excited to watch is obviously Cam Ward off of that roster.
Cam Ward, quarterback 20 right now. I feel like that's actually pretty low. When's the last time we've had a number 1 overall pick at quarterback that hasn't been like a consensus top, 15, top 16 quarterback? Because even like Caleb Williams last year was quarterback 12. Bryce Young was in that quarterback 14, quarterback 15 range. I don't think I've in my lifetime have ever seen a quarterback or a number 1 overall pick have less buzz. I guess maybe Trayvon Walker with the Jags, but like less buzz at the quarterback position than Cam Ward.
Yeah, it is true. And I also feel like part of that is because the quarterback class wasn't really great. No, and one of the players, Shedeur Sanders, who we talked about on the podcast yesterday, he ended up falling all the way to the 5th round, behind Dylan Gabriel. So, I mean, and some others. So I think that's probably part of it. Cam Ward is a guy that I think can make a fantasy impact. Listen, is he going to be Jaden Daniels? Of course not. No, I mean, there's not many of those out there, but he can move. Obviously, he's a very good passer, but the Titans have to surround him with some more talent. And I don't think they have that just yet. Yep. Although we are going to talk about, a couple of good young players here.
I did want to mention one player that I am selling from this division. I forgot to say that. And it's Anthony Richardson, whose value is already at an all-time low.
What can you sell him for? Like legit, like what can you sell him for right now? Because it seems like the only way that he has a path to value is if maybe he's not on the Colts anymore. And I don't know how much they like Daniel Jones. He's only on a 1-year deal, but like, what would you take without feeling like you got completely robbed in a trade for AR?
Well, can I give you some recent trades that kind of show you?
Yeah. There you go.
Anthony Richardson and pick 112 for Dak Prescott in a super flex league. I'd rather have Dak.
Wow, that's crazy. I mean, listen, it's insane because like we were talking about this kid being, potentially a fantasy star.
I know.
Like around this time last year.
I got another one for you.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson for Matt Stafford in a 2026 second-round pick.
Wow. Listen, man, when when the floor falls out, it really falls out.
I got another one.
Yeah, that's a 37, 38-year-old quarterback in a second-round pick for wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Anthony Richardson and Raheem Mostert, who is basically nothing for Bryce Young straight up. This happened 2 days ago.
Yeah, I mean it's Anthony Richardson for Bryce Young, basically straight up. So,
and here's the reason why. To me, it feels like the Colts are completely out on Anthony Richardson, right? Like that's you don't go out and give Daniel,
they're already sweeping him out the door.
Yes, you don't go out and give Daniel Jones that much guaranteed money for him to be a backup, right? Like they are clearly bringing him in now. He's got the shoulder issue. It just feels like they are done with Richardson. And honestly, I think big picture, I think the Colts front office knows, Chris Ballard knows that their starting quarterback in 2026 is not on the roster. It's not Daniel Jones. It's not Anthony Richardson. But what quarterback gives their skill position players a better chance to develop Tyler Warren, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, A.D. Mitchell. It's Daniel Jones because he can complete 65% of his passes compared to Anthony Richardson, who was at 47% last year. And that's why I think Daniel Jones is going to be the starter and Anthony Richardson is going to be on a new team probably next offseason.
I mean, if that happens, we got to talk about Richardson, in the conversations of one of the biggest quarterback busts in NFL draft history.
Yeah.
He was drafted. What was he? Fourth overall?
Fourth overall. Yeah.
So, I mean, you're talking about, Achilles Smith type of bust. Remember him? Oh my gosh.
Yep.
There was a stretch of quarterbacks that came out of Oregon that were Joey Harrington that were like really highly touted and they all stunk. And then Justin Herbert kind of debunked that whole thing. But there was a while the Oregon Ducks were producing good collegiate quarterbacks who couldn't play in the pros.
But I will say just really quickly before we leave, Anthony Richardson, I know his value is at an all-time low. I still want to get out because I think for a year from now, he's going to be a backup quarterback somewhere that's not even on our radar, right? And this happens a lot of times. Like when these guys wash out, they wash out really quickly. So if you can get any value out of him now, I'm moving on. All right, let's talk about some sleepers in the AFC South, including a wide receiver for the Titans. We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. The Locked On NFL Top 100 is now out on the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The NFL Top 100 was voted on by the host of Locked On, and there are some real stunners on the list. Don't miss where your favorite players were ranked. Subscribe to the Locked On Sports Today podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's talk some sleepers from the AFC South. Who do you got?
I'm going deep here, and I'm going with Alec Iomanner. And yes, I had to put his name in front of me so I can pronounce it correctly because it's not an easy one.
Nope.
Just a little bit of background on him, right? Super fast guy, track athlete in Canada before he moved to the United States. Obviously played at Stanford, made an instant impact there with over 1,000 yards as a redshirt freshman, averaged 16.2 yards per catch, which was 8th among wide receivers in FBS with a minimum of 100 targets, 4th in average depth of target. He had a contested catch rate of 48.5%, which is pretty good. This is a player that also finds himself in a spot where he's not that far off from potentially getting opportunities. And I always quote the great Bob Harris, right? I mean, clear path to workload. And look at the Titans depth chart right now. Calvin Ridley's 31 in December. Tyler Lockett's going to be 33 in September, and he's on a one-year deal. Van Jefferson's going to be 29 this month, and he's on a one-year deal. They also drafted Shaime Redike. Is that the way you say that name? They drafted all these guys whose names I can't pronounce, and then they signed Xavier Restrepo. So Treylon Burks is gone too.
Restrepo, I got you.
I butchered names like you wouldn't believe. These guys, I'm
Xavier Restrepo. Yeah, he's a 4.85 receiver. Yeah.
So they have young guys who could potentially emerge at some point in their careers into prominent options. Because Tyler Lockett's not going to be on the roster next year. Van Jefferson's not going to be on the roster next year. And so when you look at, the players that they draft, they're hoping that maybe one of these guys ends up emerging as a starter. And, Ridley's still under contract for a few more years. But Iomanner could end up being potentially the wide receiver 2 there at some point in the very near future. I would guess probably next season. I don't know about this year. Based on who they brought in. They brought in a couple of veterans, and I think they're probably going to play those guys, alongside Ridley. But if we're looking long-term, I mean, this guy's free. I mean, his ADP is almost in the 200s. He's a wide receiver 79. And so why not late in your draft, just, take a shot on him? It's kind of like, a Keaton Mitchell kind of thing. Like, you like Keaton Mitchell. Why not take a shot on him? Because there is a path to opportunities. Maybe not this year. If somebody gets hurt, then certainly. But maybe next season, he's a guy that we're talking about as competing for a starting job in Tennessee's offense. And, Cam Ward, the number 1 overall pick, they got a head coach in Brian Callahan, who's an offensive type of mind. So again, my case may not be super, super strong here, Marcus, but And they're certainly going to have to go after some wide receivers next year in the draft and in free agency because they need to give Ward more weapons around him. But they drafted Io Manor, and they're going to see if they have something in him. And fantasy managers in dynasty leagues can certainly do the same thing.
I think it's a great call. Io Manor is the only receiver that I saw give Travis Hunter problems, and actually he did it twice. Like he was really, really good in college. The quarterback play was so awful though that I don't think he wasn't able to develop some consistency. I kind of compared him to like Gabe Davis, like young Gabe Davis. Remember when we were all really high on Gabe Davis? Like that version of this big guy with not overly quick, but has long speed, can make plays down the field. You don't necessarily trust the hands, but there is something there. And I think you're right. In this offense, we could see them completely rebuild the wide receiver room in 2026. Calvin Ridley could be gone. And it's Io Manor getting a lot of snaps on the outside. So at wide receiver 80 something right now, why not?
Let me try this again. Shy Murray DK. I got that one down
Yes.
now. Okay. I'm just calling him DK from now on. If we talk about him, that's going to be his. I'm just going DK. That's easy.
Right. Can I give you my favorite rebuilding target? Right, because if you're
Sure.
rebuilding, right, you want guys on your roster that aren't going to help you win this year. And I'm a sucker for this player, Tank Dell, wide receiver 82. He's not going to play this year. He suffered a pretty gnarly knee injury on Christmas last year. He's going to miss the whole year, but he's wide receiver 82. You can probably get him in free agency now. I wouldn't be surprised if he's available. If he's not, flip a late round pick, put him on your IR. This is somebody who was very productive anytime he was on the field with CJ Stroud, averaging over 60 receiving yards per game, was a big touchdown scorer as a rookie. I know they drafted 2 receivers earlier this year, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. I just think there's something there with Tank Dell where he clicks with CJ Stroud. I'm hoping he can return to full health. If he doesn't, it's not a big deal. I just think he's too good of a player to be this far down on our rankings next to guys like, I don't know, Tyler Lockett, who's 32, Andre Yoshivas, Adam Thielen. I'll take my shot on Tank Dell.
It's worth a roll of the dice because of the price tag, and we know what he can do or what he has done in limited time. I mean, he's had 2 injuries over the first couple of seasons, and speed is his big deal. And you have an injury like that, how much of that speed and that playmaking skill is left on the operating room table? I don't know.
I don't know either. Probably at least a little bit, right?
But we know the talent's there. And so if it's a cheap move, and that's what it's got to be, and you could throw him on your IR, why not do that?
We're seeing trades right now in Dynasty League football where, like 2 years from now, 5th round picks, like pick swaps, 4th and 5th round picks. And it's understandable. The knee injury was gruesome. But there's something there, and CJ Stroud clearly likes him. And you're right. If you have one of these leagues where you can stash 4 or 5 guys on your injured reserve list, he's a perfect player to stash there, and just wait and see how he recovers.
Those spots should never be empty. Like if there's players on the waiver wire that might sniff some snaps or whatever the case may be, you should always have those fill. You can always drop a player if one of your good players ends up getting hurt. You got to throw him on the IR. But you should always have those spots full if at all possible.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. You can follow Fabs on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.